You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me today, of course, is my good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, I am doing pretty darn well. It's Thursday, and we're back to the old format, so, once we are, or at least once I'm starting to feel comfortable with the live stream, of course, we bring things back to normal. We did want to have Brad Kelly on today, but that fell through, a little bit of lack of communication there, so that's fine, not the biggest deal. So it's back to you and me, Carl, mano a mano.
Oh man, sorry, listeners. But no, we got a fun show for you today. We are going to be looking at mock drafts from around the world. Well, okay, most of them are here in the United States.
Around the web. Yes,
around the web. There you go. The World Wide Web. And so, kind of excited to look at these and see where we agree, where we disagree. We're even going to look at maybe some players that were still available that were not picked. So just kind of an exciting time with some of that. And, of course, it's draft season and we've got free agency starting here in a couple weeks. It's go time. So very, very excited about that. So make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can also follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. Make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating. Also, don't miss out on all of our great off-season content at milehighhuddle.com of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also know that our podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right. So like I said, we're going to be digging into a lot of the mock drafts that are being put out there. It seems like each week more and more of even the national guys are getting into this. And I think really kind of start off with one of our favorite guys. At least he's one of my favorite draft people. Is he one of yours?
Oh, absolutely. And we actually had we had a little bit of back and forth in a DMs the other day in regards to a somewhat off the wall Twitter account. If you know me personally, you might know who that is. But anyway, told Dane just, be careful, tread lightly. So I like Dane works. Oh, I guess I already spoiled it. Dane Brugler for The Athletic.
Oh, I was talking about Mel Kiper.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
You got to respect Mel because he's the Don. He ushered in this era.
The Godfather.
So without him, we would not be here doing this. But still, I think if you put a gun to my head, one of the best draft analysts out there for not just being team specific, but across the board, and also breaking down tape himself, as well as, having a pulse with connections around the league. Dane Brugler, you're going to have a hard time finding anybody better.
I agree completely. So it is obviously the Athletics. So you got to pay the subscription, but we are giving you what the Broncos got here. And so let's just dig into this round one. And surprise, surprise. This is, how in the world did he arrive at this player? Henry Ruggs of Alabama.
Wow.
What a surprise. This is what he has to say about it. He says, the Broncos have a budding number one wideout in Courtland Sutton, but adding more speed opposite him would help open the offense. Ruggs has world-class speed, and his ability to shift gears puts cornerbacks in a blender, creating passing windows downfield. Huh. Sounds familiar.
Yep. From us to other outlets, I know that Ben Albright, we're recording this on March 5th, so Wednesday night, March 4th. Ben Albright was on defending this decision on his radio show with Brian Edwards, which I will actually be on Friday night, so that'll be already out there after this is up. But either way, it makes a lot of sense. Henry Ruggs was something I wish people understood is that even if he doesn't touch the ball, he's creating for everyone else because you cannot ignore his speed, and he's not just a speed player. I think his route running, while there's still areas where he could learn to throttle down, sink his hips and change direction, I just think the upside with the speed and the physicality he possesses is on a tier of its own in this class. So him at 15, that sounds like it's the Broncos' number one target. And if he's there at 15, they'll sprint to the podium and be thankful. It sounds like they like Henry Ruggs enough that, honest to God, they might even be considering a move up if it came to that, but we'll see.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on how teams have the wide receiver order and how quickly they're willing to go ahead and go wide receiver in this draft. So there's so much at play. It's going to be kind of a wild ride, but they did have some players available. Javon Kinlaw, CJ Henderson, AJ Epinesa, Xavier McKinney. I still think they got it right. Or Dane got it right. Henry Ruggs has to be the choice there if he's the top player still available like that. Maybe an argument for Javon Kinlaw. The rest of them, I don't think it really come down to those two for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, but Ruggs would be my Kinlaw scares me because of the knee, and I don't have the medicals in front of me. All I can go on is what I'm told, and there could be, let's call it as it is, BS going around this time of year. Let's say the Falcons really want Kinlaw at 16. Yeah, I'm going to be screaming to all my sources, oh man, that knee with Kinlaw is scary. But if it's really scary, what do we know? Without it directly in front of us and, our
right.
own, quote unquote, our own doctors looking at it, it's all speculative. So it scares me. I still like Kinlaw a lot. I'm operating that he will be fine. But again, it's out there. So Ruggs, love him a lot. Love the fit. And this is a good wide receiver class. But I do think that Ruggs is different than anyone else in this class. There's a lot of speed, but he has like standard deviations, different speed than other wide receivers in his class. So I have no issue with him at 15. I would be ecstatic about him at 15. And man, it would make the Broncos offense intriguing and fun to watch going forward.
All right. Well, his round 2 draft of this draft is Jeff Gladney, cornerback, TCU. And this has been a player that I've hyped up quite a bit, how much I like him and just his fit in this defense, of his physicality, his willingness to help in the run game, his speed to be able to go down the field to cover the speed that's going to be in the AFC West. And just give you some idea of some other players that be available here. Jalen Reagor, double up on wide receiver, possibly.
Probably not.
Probably not. Lloyd Cushenberry, Cesar Ruiz, one of your favorites, Jalen Johnson, Laviska Shenault, and KJ Hamler. So a few wide receivers. I really can't see the Broncos wanting to double up. I know that they have 2 wide receiver needs, but depending on 2 rookies to come in and perform, I think they're probably going to go ahead and get a guy in free agency. And so Jeff Gladney here, even though they've went out and got the guy that we just talked about on Tuesday's episode after the Broncos got him, and Boye, Jeff Gladney, you're still needing more cornerback depth.
Yeah.
You're needing at least one more cornerback. And if Jeff Gladney's that guy, he's going to have his rookie ups and downs, but I like his upside to be able to really perform. And especially if you have Boye covering the number 1s, really, he's going to be number 3 because you're going to have Callahan as well that they're going to trust quite a bit. And so Gladney, he's not going to have the toughest matchups year 1, which is really, really nice for a rookie to kind of ease himself into things. And so again, really, really like this pick. Probably would be the highest guy on my board as well.
Yeah, I really like Gladney a lot. The surgery on the meniscus is something, again, kind of concerned there, but it's not like the talk with Kinlaw where it could be degenerative knee concerns where he might only play that first contract. So Gladney right now, he is my number 2 cornerback for the Broncos specifically. I think CJ Henderson will be the second cornerback off the board. It's not a scheme fit as much for me, but I like Gladney a lot. I will say though, Cesar Ruiz gives me pause there. I really like his game a lot. The Broncos need center and interior offensive line talent / depth, and Ruiz can fill in at right guard or center both very well. And also he's scheme diverse. So I do think I'd take Gladney, but man, if Munchak said, man, give me Cesar Ruiz, I would have no issue with it. I think Cesar Ruiz is going to be the only interior offensive lineman off the board round 1. So taking him the middle round 2, I think that's a great get.
Hard to disagree with you there. Well, round 3, the very first 3rd round pick here for the Broncos, they do go get their center in Matt Hennessy of Temple. What do you think about this kid?
My number 3 center. I like him a lot. He's they rave about his intelligence, which you want that from your center. And while I don't think he possesses the the power or positional versatility that Ruiz has, where he can play guard or center, and Ruiz has a bit more power. Hennessy moves really well, and he could be a really good center. So round 3, I like the fit a lot. He's a guy that, probably plug and play center, especially if you're taking him round 3, and would be good. So I like this pick a lot. There's some other guys here available still. Noah Igbahanahi, excuse me for that. Noah I from Auburn. Damian Lewis from LSU, who I don't love. I feel like I'm much more in a power-heavy scheme. Bryce Hall, kind of the same thing. I prefer actually Noah because I think he's not as scheme-dependent. And then Antonio Gandy-Golden and Damon Arnett, who's a guy that has talent, but he's older. There's some character concerns and didn't test like many had hoped. So I like this pick a lot. I guess for me, if looking at it and knowing how it would have went, I like Gladney, then Hennessy. But also I would have had zero issue with Cesar Ruiz and then Noah Igbahanahi from Auburn. So I'd have no issue with how this went. Honestly, it's probably the way I'd lean, but I wouldn't have it if you flipped the interior offensive line and the cornerback from Auburn. That's also a good-looking group there.
Right. No, I'm with you there. That's probably pretty similar. I mean, can you actually see this being a reality?
Yeah, I think this is realistic. I mean, after the top, the draft is unpredictable as it can get. That's what makes it so fascinating. Like up until literally the day of the draft, it was Sam Darnold going number 1 to the Browns, write it in. And then all of a sudden, actually, guys, it's Baker Mayfield. So this far down, who knows? It only takes one team to love a guy. So, but this all seems realistic and within range.
All right, well, let's finish out his draft here. He's got Logan Wilson, linebacker of Wyoming, and Jason Strawbridge, defensive lineman from North Carolina.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, any issue with either of those two picks?
I do not love the selection of Strobridge. I'll be completely honest. I think that he's kind of that tweener and not in the way that you'd like. He's probably best, I think, at a 4-3 defensive end. And if he is playing in this Broncos scheme, he's filling the same niche, in my opinion, as Draymond Jones and DeMarcus Walker, who I'm probably going to write an article at some point that it's time to bury DeMarcus Walker. But Strobridge, I don't love. There's other guys I prefer more that can make more sense with what you already have in those two guys specifically. And I do like Logan Wilson a fair amount. I would be curious in other linebackers. I really like how this day 2 for linebacker is shaping up. Some people have talked about, Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray for the Broncos round 1, but the day 2 is stacked. Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech, Troy Dye from Oregon, Malik Harrison from Ohio State, Akeem Davis-Gaither from Appalachian State, Willie Gay from Mississippi State, although he scares me because he's had multiple issues off the field. And then there's kind of some hybrid guys also that would be interesting for the Broncos in that range. Yeah, you have Jeremy Chin from Southern Illinois, Kyle Duggar from Lenoir-Rhyne, Davion Taylor from Colorado, who did really well at the combine, and then kind of some edge linebacker hybrids in like Zach Bond, Cotter Coughlin, and Josh Uche. So really good day 2 for linebacker. I'm going to be a big proponent of taking one in this range. Logan Wilson's one I like there. It's just, how much do I like him than some of these other guys? He, late day 3 or late round 3, early round 4. That seems like his range for me. So it's not a home run pick, but it makes sense. Solid.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to the Draft Network. I know a lot of people have been doing tons of mock drafts and sending them all of our way. And really appreciate that, everyone that keeps tagging us in all those mock drafts. And sorry if we don't get back. I've missed a couple. I know. I'm sorry about that. But no, love that you guys send those to us. Keep sending them clear up to the draft. And then we'll start on 2021. We don't
ready.
care. Yeah.
More wide receivers.
Right. But no, Trevor Sikkema just put out one here. I think it was Monday. And he did a 3-round mock as well, for the entire 3 rounds. But for the Broncos, he has round 1 being Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver from Alabama. So, it's kind of funny. About the top 3 or 4 players that keep getting mocked to the Broncos are Alabama players.
Yeah.
And keeps still saying John Elway doesn't draft Alabama players. So I guess we'll see if that comes to a head here.
Woody Page just tweeted out last week where this could be the season where that streak is finally broken. So, purely speculation. We'll be completely serious about that, but it could happen.
Yeah, and that has always gotten overblown.
Yeah.
A lot of times, Alabama players have been going top 15 picks. Well, until the last couple of years, Broncos were not picking top 15.
And a lot of times they are indeed overdrafted.
Yep.
Let's be completely honest. There's teams that like the brand, know Saban, know those guys are going to come in battle-tested and tough. So like a team like Baltimore or the Redskins, both those teams gobble up Alabama players. Sometimes, let's call it as it is, overdrafted. So it's not that Elway is avoiding Alabama players at all cost. I mean, in reality, it's a pretty small sample size of Alabama players comparison to the entire field of guys available. But again, it depends on how the board falls. I mean, Kareem Jackson's a guy that they like. They targeted C.J. Mosley in the draft and in free agency, reportedly. So I just think it's kind of a narrative that is, overall, it's silly.
I agree. Anyway, Jerry Jeudy round 1, this is what he has to say. With Lamb, Ruggs, and all 4 of the top offensive tackles on the board, the Broncos will likely off the board, I think is what he meant to say. The Denver Broncos will likely turn their attention to the wide receiver class with their eyes set on Jerry Jeudy. Judy's quick feet and elite separation would make him a perfect complement to Cortland Sutton on the outside. Ruggs appears to be the Broncos' top target, so they could get aggressive for him in a potential trade-up, just like you talked about earlier. But Jeudy would elevate the offense plenty himself. And so other players that were still available, Henderson, Fulton, and McKinney, so some secondary players. But really, I mean, when it comes down to it, Jerry Jeudy would still be the highest guy on my board. If that's what's left, it's kind of one of those things where the Broncos can kind of sit back and see who falls to them. And it just depends on the day of who's going to be the wide receiver that kind of falls to him. This time it was Jerry Jeudy. And I keep saying he's the top wide receiver on my board because he is the perfect fit for this system. Now, he doesn't make teams have to completely change up coverage like a Henry Ruggs, but he is still an elite wide receiver prospect. This guy can dominate in so many different ways. He can win in the short, the medium, the long, whatever you need him to do, this guy can go out there and win. Now, yeah, he doesn't have the elite speed of Ruggs, but he's still fast enough. And he's got that quick first step, great route runner, would be a day one starter. I mean, there's no getting this guy ready for the NFL. He is NFL ready. I mean, you just talked about that with Alabama players where teams kind of like that. Well, Jerry Jeudy fits that mold of being NFL ready. So for me, this is a home run hit. If the Broncos can get him, I mean, I go back and forth because you're right. You and I were talking a couple days ago about our wide receiver rankings and starting to think Ruggs just because of that elite speed and how teams have to play the Broncos if he's on the field really changes things. But I still lean Jerry Jeudy just because I like his floor much more than Ruggs.
Yeah, I think Jeudy, especially because, again, Pat Shurmur coming to town means the Broncos, instead of that Kyle Shanahan-style offense where it's much more 12 and 21 personnel heavy, 2 wide receivers out wide, you're going to see more 11 personnel. And where Jeudy operates the best, bar none, is that slot position where his route running and his ability to go inside or outside is the best. I would like to see his ability, kind of the slot fade vertical from the slot more than I did at Alabama, but when you have Henry Ruggs, occupying that niche, didn't really need it with Jerry Jeudy. So Jerry Jeudy, the high volume target, along with Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, honestly, at Alabama. And if he's the one who falls to 15, you say thank you and you move on. It does sound like there's some talk that he is thought of less than some of these other wide receivers. The NFL is not as high on him than the league. And, some people compare him to Odell Beckham Jr. or Julio Jones. You don't want to put too much weight into the combine, but can we stop those comparisons? He's not that type of wide receiver. I don't think he has that athletic upside. The just the freakiness of Julio Jones. There's only one Julio Jones in the NFL, if we're being completely honest. Even at his age, there's only one Julio Jones. And Odell Beckham Jr.'s explosiveness and ability in the air, that's not Julio Jones, or that's not Jerry Jeudy. But probably a better end, Calvin Ridley. There's some value there. I think, again, I'm kind of selling him short maybe on that one.
I was going to say I would take Jeudy over Ridley every day of the week.
Yeah. I think that stylistically, though, that makes the most sense. You know, a high-end wide receiver, too, that can occupy the Z and the slot. So better route runner. But I just think Calvin Ridley was not blessed with quarterback play that Jerry Jeudy was. So I like Jerry Jeudy a lot. I do think that at 15, if he's the guy there, you say thank you and you move on.
Right. It's possibly not a home run, because I do think that Ruggs and Lamb possibly have a higher ceiling, but it is about as guaranteed to be at least a B plus as there is, kind of thing. And if you can find that middle of the first round, you're going to take that most years. So like I said, if that's the guy that falls, if the other two wide receivers go, you said it. You just say thank you. You move on to the second round, and you're happy with that because you just got yourself a day one starter, and you really don't have to worry about, is he going to be ready? He just is. But all right, round 2. Damon Arnett, cornerback, Ohio State. You just talked about him. He didn't test well. He's a little bit older and has some character concerns, especially after missing some workouts this offseason. He says it was because his, wife or girlfriend was having a baby. And so, I mean, that's a little bit understandable if there was other concerns beyond that one that were already surfacing. So it didn't help that he went that direction. But some other players that were still available, Cam Akers, Brandon Ayuk, AJ Terrell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Ezra Cleveland, a guy that's been really climbing up boards, especially after his testing. How do you feel about this one?
I like this one a little less, honestly. It's just all the stuff surrounding Arnett, and also with him being older. I mean, he's going to be 24 or is already 24. So by the time that he reaches his second contract, he's only going to be 2 years off from that cornerback fall off a cliff age. So it scares me. Round 2, I think that's just probably a little higher on him than I would like. But if there's a run on corners, maybe that's the pick. I know that Trevor Sikkema and Ben Solak like Arnett a little bit more. But I don't love this one. I just give it a solid C.
Yeah, there's a couple other guys on that board that I really wouldn't mind seeing there for the Broncos. I'd probably have Terrell higher than Arnett right now. Ezra Cleveland would be very tempting. I mean, I know we get to the next round here, round 3, that we see him take an offensive tackle for the Broncos, but that would be tempting. And of course, then the running backs, it's a little high for me, but they're both very talented running backs as well that I think would be really good fits in this system. So I don't know. It's a solid C for me.
Yeah. And, I probably would have taken Terrell over him. Actually, Ezra Cleveland, honestly. After taking Jerry Jeudy, getting an upside tackle like Cleveland makes a lot of sense. But the next pick, he gets that guy, Shadiq Charles, offensive tackle from LSU. You talking about something that really goes against the Broncos' recent draft philosophy. Both these guys have character concerns, a pretty good chunk of character concerns. So I guess I don't love this one. I don't love this pick, and I think it sounds like Shadiq Charles might be heading for guard in the league. So back-to-back picks I don't really love. I do love the next two, though. Malik Harrison, round 3, middle round 3. I like Malik Harrison a lot. I think he's going to go in the top 50. He actually came to Ohio State as a quarterback, or played quarterback in high school, then was moved to wide receiver when he first came to Ohio State, then moved to linebacker. So he's still pretty raw, and you saw him get better and better every year. He's big, he's long, he can move. It's all getting better for him. And then the third pick, Jeremy Chin, safety / linebacker from Southern Illinois. I love that pick. Actually, did you know that he's related to Steve Atwater?
Yeah, he's a nephew?
Yeah, something like that. Either way, sign me up. I love Chin's upside. And if you're talking about, Vic Fangio was talking about at the Combine, Broncos are going to play more 6 defensive back, 5 defensive back situations. Chin is that guy that he's a slot defender. That emerging position, that star backer, kind of what I envision Isaiah Simmons to be. Well, Chin is the discount version of him. So I think he's not getting out of round 2, honestly, and I'd love him there.
Yeah. A couple guys that were available that I really like. Isaiah Wilson. That would have been a really nice choice instead of Shadiq. I think a little bit less risk and a little bit higher upside, in my opinion. I mean, the guy blocks out the sun. I watched him interview there at the Combine, and it's like the guy took up the entire stage. I don't know how he's that big, but he is. And he's athletic on top of it. So that would be a tough guy to pass up on. We do have Andrew Mason's favorite guy, Tyler Biadasz, still on the board. So a possibility there that solved that center problem for the Broncos. And then Van Jefferson's another one, a great route runner. But if you already got Jerry Jeudy, it's kind of hard to then go get another great route runner. They'd kind of be doubling up on what they would both be bringing to the table. But all right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and look at a few more of these mock drafts that are out there.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And welcome back to Building the Broncos. And we're going to look here real quick at a couple of them that only have a first-round pick, and then a couple of them that only have maybe just a few picks. We'll kind of dig into that. But all right, let's go to Walter Football. They do actually have, I think it's 6 rounds.
Wow.
is what they have. So we can dig really into this. But of course, they start off with the surprise, Henry Ruggs. Talking about, of course, Cortland Sutton being a beast, but the Broncos have nothing else at wide receiver after moving on from Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders in consecutive years. Drew Lock looks like he has some potential, so John Elway needs to give his young quarterback another weapon. Henry Ruggs is a very fast receiver who would be a nice complement for Sutton. Okay.
I mean, what's going to be said that we haven't said already? You know,
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. I guess, Carl, talk to me why Henry Ruggs isn't John Ross. That's this narrative that's coming out from some, gosh, I don't want to call out anybody too much, but fans, emphasis on the fans aspect. And why isn't he John Ross?
Well, I mean, he's not going 104.3 miles an hour, but he's close. No, so the difference is here. One, part of why John Ross has struggled in the NFL is injuries. He can't stay on the field. And if you can't stay on the field, you can't put up stats. Number two, John Ross has struggled because of drops. And he's gotten himself open. His speed gets him open. But he's just not taking advantage of the opportunities that he does have. And then on top of that, he hasn't had exactly the greatest talented team around him. I mean, they're picking number 1 overall for a reason. There's not much talent. The quarterback position has been a mess. And Andy Dalton is average at best at the quarterback position at best, and isn't always great at the deep throw, all those kind of things. And so John Ross just hasn't been a great fit for what they needed and how they've been able to use him. And so then on top of that, now looking at the other side of this, I guess, is that Henry Ruggs, he only had 1 drop this past year. I think he had 10.5-inch hands.
Yeah,
at the combine?
massive hands, or 10 1/4 or something. He's
Yeah.
in the 91st percentile of hands measured for wide receivers. He does not have big arms, long arms, but his hands are massive.
Right. And so big hands usually are part of being really good at catching the football. And Henry Ruggs has shown he has pretty darn good hands. Not the best I've ever seen, but he's willing to be a hand catcher, which you know how much I value that. He's not going to let the ball get into his body a whole lot of times. And then on top of that, I think Henry Ruggs is coming in as a better route runner than John Ross was. John Ross was about as raw as they coming into the league. And it was pretty much, you tell him go run deep and that's about it. Where Henry Ruggs, he offers a lot more. Actually, a lot of his plays were not him actually winning deep. That wasn't really Alabama's offense. If anything, they did that more with Devontae Smith than they ever did with Henry Ruggs, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's just because Tua didn't like throwing to the right side, because that's usually Henry Ruggs was on the right side, Devonta was on the left side. I don't know why. But anyway, they didn't use Henry Ruggs in that way as much as you would think for a guy that can run as fast as he did. So he was winning on a lot of short routes that he was taking deep. And so again, Henry Ruggs offers a lot more of a well-rounded prospect than John Ross ever was coming out of college. And he's also coming from a system that's much more pro-ready. I mean, you already talked about it. When you're talking about Alabama, players usually come out much more NFL ready because they're trained by coaches that were once NFL coaches. Where John Ross, coming from Washington, he had a great coaching staff, but it wasn't the same. So again, there's just so many differences between these two. You can't just sit here and say, he's fast. Well, this fast guy busted, so that means this fast guy is going to bust. Again, speed is not the issue for John Ross. Speed is why John Ross has won the few times that he has.
And honestly, they were pretty good this year when John Ross was on the field. The issue is more so he's not on the field.
Right,
like
exactly.
He opened up a good amount for them. And like with Tyler Boyd underneath and some other weapons, granted there was a cluster cluck, I'll call that, over in Cincinnati in general. But like when John Ross was on the field, he's not worth the 9th overall pick. But you did see a little bit of that, we'll just call it the Will Fuller effect, where his presence dictated some coverage and opened things up for other people. So
right.
It's not what you want for the 9th overall pick. Let's be completely honest. But again, comparing John Ross to Henry Ruggs I think it's a major disservice to the prospect that Henry Ruggs is.
Right. It's very lazy. It's like I said, it's looking at, hey, this guy's fast. Let's draw a conclusion between those two things.
Yeah, that would be like, oh man, Andrew Thomas, first round tackle, he's going to be Levi Brown or Jason Smith or Greg Robinson. It's like, why? There's nothing to that other than you're just pulling it out of your rear end.
Right. Exactly.
Frustrates me to no end.
Right. You're right. And that's why we talk about this so much on these kind of shows, because you get those people who are out there doing the box score scouting. And there are some out there, especially for Henry Ruggs. This is another stat that they've brought up, that he only had 3.3 touches per game. Well, how big is that for a first round player that he didn't get all these touches and things like that? And I'm going, but he scores every fourth time he touches the football. That's still, if you average that out, that would be 13 touchdowns a year from your number 2 wide receiver. And that's not even including, like you said, how much they dictate coverage for everybody else. Henry Ruggs opened up everything for Jerry Jeudy, for Devontae Smith, for
Waddle.
Yep, exactly. For all those guys, everything opened up for them. The run game opened up for them because they had to keep safeties back. And so Henry Ruggs was doing so much without the football that, again, it made his impact incredible there for Alabama. Whether he was catching it or not in a game. And for the Broncos, it's the same thing.
And a big thing that I feel like you see a lot of Henry Ruggs detractors on Twitter or whatever sphere, and a good amount of them are the metrics-based, heavy in the fantasy football realm. So that makes sense to me, because Henry Ruggs, his value isn't so much the Jerry Jeudy where he's getting peppered with targets. Can you give him more targets? Would you have liked to have seen him get more targets? Yes, absolutely. But watching the film, he's open.
Yep.
He's freaking open, but then Tua's throwing it to Jeudy, who's the higher completion percentage, the higher efficient option, because typically he's closer to the line of scrimmage, or, more over the middle of the field than what you saw from Ruggs. So, again, I think we need to be able to differentiate where we're seeing the Devy folks, the developmental football prospect evaluators, and those that are actually analyzing a player for what they bring to the football game. So obviously there's enough niches and whatnot for everybody to operate, but that's two different. Those are people asking and answering two different questions.
Right. And you also think about, like you said, Tua was a very calculated quarterback. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, he had a high completion percentage, didn't throw a lot of interceptions. The offense ran really well with him. But I don't think he was always the best quarterback to be paired with Henry Ruggs. Where Drew Lock likes to throw that deep ball. His best season was when he had a deep threat wide receiver that could just take the top off a defense. And so getting that kind of player again for him, he's not a guy that's afraid to go deep, take some chances. And on top of that, I mean, you could do a lot of other things with Henry Ruggs beyond just being able to throw deep. But it just, again, there's just so much more to this picture than just the raw stats. And if that's all you're looking at, then I'm sorry, you're missing a big picture of what's going to happen. And Henry Ruggs, there's probably going to be a lot of games where he's maybe only going to have 1 reception, 20 yards, maybe. But then there's going to also be games where he has like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then teams are going to adjust and say, well, we got to stop Henry Ruggs. Well, then Cortland Sutton's going to have a big game. Teams are going to have to pick their poison of who they're going to stop.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you there. So for Ruggs, people calling him Tyreek Hill, I see that kind of stuff. But again, calling Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, I think some more apt comparisons for a guy like Henry Ruggs. Somebody like, this is more of a low end, like if he hits a D level, not even average level, but D level, guy like Mike Wallace, a guy like Santonio Holmes, a guy like Santana Moss. Those guys all make more sense to me.
All right, well, let's move on to round 2 here, because we could talk about Ruggs all day and how great of a player he is. But they have Trayvon Diggs. We're going Alabama back-to-back. Well,
yeah.
Let's just eliminate this Alabama issue here. And so he says, the Broncos tried to obtain Darius Slay prior to last year's trade deadline. They could deal for Slay again. Not happening. If not, they'll be interested in a cornerback in the early rounds of the 2020 draft. Trayvon Diggs, younger brother of Vikings receiver Stephon Diggs, began as a receiver at Alabama, but was tremendous last season at cornerback before suffering a foot injury.
Yeah, I mean, I like the pick. I feel like Diggs, this is about the range where Diggs makes sense. Didn't run at the pro day or the combine, so we'll see him at the pro day. He's long. He's probably going to take a year before we really figure out who he is because he is decently raw. But, I mean, what is it, pick 46? That seems about the proper range for Trayvon Diggs.
Yep. No, I'm with you. And I like his game. He's pretty raw because he did start off as wide receiver and they kind of last minute changed him over to cornerback. But he's long, he's fast, he's physical. A lot of traits that you're going to really like in a Fangio defense. And he's only hitting the beginning part of what he could be as a cornerback, I think. But all right, yeah. Round 3 then, they have Marlon Davidson, a defensive end / defensive tackle of Auburn. Said Derek Wolfe always seems to get hurt, so the Broncos could take a defensive tackle in rounds 2 through 4 of the 2020 NFL draft.
I like Davidson a lot. Round 3 is good value. He's actually in my top 50, so this is a good. I'm curious to see how the rest of the board looks because a lot of these guys are good. So I like Davidson a lot. And the next 2, I really, really like Jeff Gladney and Lucas Niang. I mean, that's fantastic. So some of these stuff don't make sense. I feel like they've kept some of the dialogue in the draft in the season because in the Jeff Gladney one, they said that the Broncos could trade Chris Harris Jr. There was talk of that during the season, but that doesn't make sense now. And Lucas Niang, I love a lot. There are some questions about his knee. Granted, it's football. I feel like we're talking about that with a lot of these players, but this is both of these I like a lot. So I'm going to keep it moving here because we're getting long and you don't want to reach that over an hour thing. But round 4 here, somebody that I've actually never watched yet. The name sounds familiar. I remember watching him last year when I was watching Bobby Okereke, but that is Casey Toohill from Stanford. 1-year wonder, but played extremely well in 2019. So I remember that name, but just I couldn't tell you much more about him. And A.J. Dillon, round 6 here for the Broncos. I think he did really well. He's a big back, but he's a dying breed in today's league. I'm going to call it as it is. He might sneak into the top 100. Getting him round 6 is a tremendous value, but I don't see him getting this far. I think he's more of a early round 3 or early day 3 kind of guy. Round 4 is where I'd be looking to take him. Right.
No, you're right. But that kind of power and speed combination that he has, it's fun to watch.
I don't love his footwork. He's a one-cut runner that cut is not great timed. And he has stiff hips, not very much wiggle. So I get that people are excited about how he ran for his size and the explosiveness in his jumps and everything like that. But it's just some of the stuff with the tape. And I know he's had ankle issues at Boston College. So there's, sometimes he wasn't always healthy and they leaned heavily on him at that program. But I think he's somebody that is a tad bit overhyped right now compared to where I think he will go, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, let's dig into then the drafts that only have the first round.
Okay.
And so we're going to start off with Roto World's Josh Norris. And, of course, he has Henry Ruggs. But it's kind of interesting. He does have CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy still available.
That is interesting.
There are some drafts that you're seeing the wide receivers go as early as like 7, 8, 9 kind of thing. And then others that, it really does kind of start with the Broncos.
Yeah.
So it varies on how people are evaluating. I don't think it's so much that they're evaluating the talent at wide receiver, but it's because these guys are all worth top 15 picks. But it's more just, again, because of needs at other positions for teams and seeing that there's value at wide receiver later in the draft, it pushes some of the talent down sometimes. We'll see if that happens in the real draft, but I do think that is a real possibility that the Broncos could find themselves with a couple choices here at wide receiver.
Yeah. No, you're correct, and good pick. I'm surprised that all three of those wide receivers are still there. Would have no issue with any of them. Another one that's interesting here, Daniel Jeremiah had the Broncos taking Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma, and I know that Sayer Bettinger, friend of the podcast, also had the Broncos taking Kenneth Murray. I'm sorry, the linebacker to me is almost like running back, where I am staunchly against them round one, unless they are just a super dynamic player like Isaiah Simmons, who I don't even categorize as a linebacker. I can find linebackers day two, and especially this year, I think there's a lot of talent. I went over a bunch of the names last time, so I don't love Kenneth Murray round one for the Broncos. If they trade down into the mid-20s, then you're accumulating extra value. You can kind of live with that lack of return on investment when you can get equitable return day two. But I just don't love Kenneth Murray, especially with Kinlaw, Lamb, and Ruggs on the board still.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't love that one. And then from Cynthia Froyland, who did a mathematical model that did a mock based on what player would give the Broncos the most, or whatever team, the most likely increase in win totals next year, which okay, interesting. But she didn't have any quarterbacks going to the top five, which again, okay, odd, just kind of a different thing. But had the Broncos taken Xavier McKinney, safety from Alabama, and I like McKinney a lot. I know that he didn't test like many had hoped, but he's just such a smart, heady player, great. He's always in the right spot and versatile. So, he doesn't have the size or the length of the movement skills you see with Isaiah Simmons, but he does a lot of what Isaiah Simmons does really well. So McKinney, I think he's going to continue to be my dark horse for the Broncos at 15. I like his fit a lot.
Yeah. Just with some of the players still on the board, that's where I have a little bit of an issue. They still have Mekhi Becton, CJ Henderson. Of course, Ruggs is still on the board as well. And so it's a little bit, I understand what she's trying to do. Like you said, was trying to, work more of the analytics side of things. But other players I'd probably take ahead of them, especially Becton and Ruggs. I think I would have ahead of McKinney at this time. Mm-hmm. The CBS Sports, they have a long list of guys. I'm not going to list all of them here, but I know like Pete Prisco's one of them. Here's just some of the names that they have. Pretty much the same names. Couple new ones here, though. They do have Derek Brown falling to the Broncos in round one. One person
seeming more and more possible.
Of course, Jerry Jeudy. They had Ruggs a couple different times. They did have Diggs as the 15th overall pick. CJ Henderson after a trade back. And Andrew Thomas was another one that they had there at 15. So just still a lot of the same, but a couple different names that are intriguing, especially if Brown falls there to 15. That would be very nice.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I don't love. I'll be honest, I do not love what would you call it? I guess Henderson's fit. After trading back, I can live with it a little bit more. But I just don't think he's a great fit. And Diggs, round 115, extra hard pass. That's not a great pick.
I'm with you. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to get into Eric Trickle. Just put out a mock draft not too long ago after the combine was done. This was his fourth mock draft, and he had some interesting ideas for the Broncos. So don't leave. We'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And welcome back to Building the Broncos. I am Carl Dumler, joined, of course, with Nick Kendell. We have one of our own, Eric Trickle, that we are going to completely destroy his mock draft and how terrible it is. I'm just kidding, Eric. But no, he did have some interesting ideas. And Eric always tries to do this, where he doesn't want every mock draft to end up being the same thing. And so I always commend him on that fact, because, of course, if you're not doing the usual thing of taking, of course, Henry Ruggs in the first, you're going to get a lot of criticism for that. But this just gives kind of some different ideas of how the Broncos could attack this draft. And he starts off with the Broncos trading back twice. And so started off with, I think, a trade with the Patriots, and they landed, I think it was a 3rd round pick and maybe a 6th round pick or something like that. And then they traded back again with I think it was the Green Bay Packers, and picked up an extra 4th round pick. So
I want to see a mock where Eric trades up. Every year. I mean, good for him, but every year I see he loves those picks, pick 20 to 90. So he does mocks where, he has like 7 picks in that range, which, maybe not the worst strategy. That's mid-2000s Patriots, but it's just the kind of the status quo for Eric. I want to see one where he's aggressive and there's less picks and he goes up and really, attaches his horse to a few guys. So anyway, continue.
Yeah,
I just wanted to give him a
Should we start
dig.
calling him Eric Belichick?
Yeah. I'm going to call him Eric Patricia.
There you go. He'd love that. Everybody, do that on Twitter. He'll love that. Just kidding. But no, so he has this trade back. Do you like the value of picking up an extra 3rd and 4th round pick to go from 15 to 30?
Honestly, I don't.
I don't either.
I think I need more than that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I would need 2/3, or if they're trading back that far, a 3 and a 2021 second. But a 3 and a 4th, I mean, there is, again, talking about Timo Risky, who we had on the podcast last week. He did a study. Essentially, everything that's not a top 100 pick, launch it into the sun. Those day 2 picks are more valuable than you'd think, actually. Like the Jimmy Johnson model, he has much more of a drop-off from the first pick to like the 100th pick, where it's not so much that way. But once it gets to pick 100, it pretty much flatlines. So you need to get as many picks in the top 100 as you can. So getting a 4th round pick, moving down 15 spots, no, I need more than that. I need more top 100 picks or future top 100 picks.
And I do want to point this out because I know some people have brought this up with some of Eric's trades. Eric does a lot of his trades based on trades that he's seen happen in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I know there is the draft calculator out there,
which uses Jimmy Johnson's chart, which is not true for every team.
Right, exactly.
And it depends on the draft. I mean, if there's quarterbacks in there, the trades are only worth what somebody's willing to pay. So, again, it's like, is Billy Turner worth that contract? Well, the Packers paid it, didn't they? So he's worth it. It comes down to that. And
I think the trade that he made with the Patriots was for a quarterback. And so for me, that's where you say, hey, we need more. And I know the Patriots don't have a 2nd round pick this year, but like I said, maybe a 2021 pick thrown in there. But anyway, all right, let's get to his pick. He has Ross Blacklock, a defensive lineman, and he's been really climbing up boards, it seems like, over the last I know, like, doing mock drafts on the draft network, you could get him in that 3rd, 4th round pretty easily. Seems like he's really moved up into that 2nd round conversation, but he has him here 1st round. How do you like that fit?
I like the fit. I think this is probably the range for him. I do think that there is a significant tier difference between Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw to the next guy, so maybe I'm looking elsewhere. But I like Blacklock a good amount. So again, you're really changing the talent levels that you're getting from pick 15. It's a good top 100, but I think pick 15 compared to pick 30 with how this class is shaping up, that's a significant difference in the kind of player that you can get. So I like it. I think I'm a little bit soured with the 3rd and 4th on top of it.
All right. Well, then he gets his wide receiver, because he has another 2nd round pick here, or has our 1st round, that was in the 1st round, so now we're in the 2nd round. He has Jalen Reagor going back to TCU, same as Ross Blacklock, wide receiver. He says, back-to-back Horned Frogs. Reagor had a rough combine and a lot of chalking it up to unneeded added weight. When he plays at a hair over 190 pounds but weighed in at 206, many thought he wouldn't look as clean, smooth, or fast. The combine will hurt, but he isn't going to plummet because his tape is great.
I love Reagor round 2. This is a good pick. I'm eager to see how everything looks at the pro day, but I'm trying not to overreact to it because honestly, what was it, 4.4, 640 or something like that? That's not great, but that's still good. That's still really fast.
It's Jerry Jeudy ran. It's faster than what Lamb ran. So
I'm expecting Reagor to be a faster player than both those.
Well, I understand, but it's still like just trying to put some perspective on it. It's not the worst speed ever.
But when it comes to concern, and this is across the board, it might be with the new combine formatting because this year had absolutely horrific agility drills across the board, which made no sense. But then almost all the guys were outliers in that regard. So again, it makes me question the formatting more than anything. I mean, they were doing agility drills at 10 o'clock at night, which is crazy when they asked those guys to get there at 2 p.m. But the agility drills for Reagor do concern me. So pro day will be interesting. The next pick he has, going to the Broncos, back-to-back wide receivers, and I really like this one. He actually has a trade here. Trade 3 of the 3rd-round picks to Seattle's, or the Broncos trade 3 of the 3rd-round picks, so number 3, I guess, is what that means, to Seattle's number 2 2nd-round pick, and they pick up Brandon Ayuk. Denver double dips on the wide receiver position and players both capable of stretching out the defenses. They both can also work underneath, the middle, and even on the boundary. They're really complementary skill sets to Cortland Sutton with Rager and Ayuk's versatility and yak ability. So getting Rager and Ayuk, this makes I understand taking the Blacklock pick, but this round 2 is absolutely killer.
Yeah, he's got one more round 2 pick here. So he traded 3 third-round picks for Seattle's 2 second-round picks.
Okay, that makes sense now. Interesting.
Yes.
So
yeah, he's wheeling and dealing here.
Yeah.
And so final round 2 pick that he has is Isaiah Wilson, offensive tackle of Georgia. He says Wilson had a really good combine, but he still needs development before he's ready to be a starter in the NFL. Denver isn't looking for a starter out of the gates, but a guy that they can coach up, develop, and start if needed in 2020, then push for a starting job in 2021. Wilson is exactly that, and Mike Munchak can do wonders for his game.
I like Wilson. Maybe this is a little higher than I would expect, but I think there's going to be a massive run on tackles in the top 2 rounds, so I get it. I guess the question is, are the Broncos going to be running more inside zone / power, or are they still going to be trying to implement some outside zone? Because Wilson I don't see as a guy who you do not want him moving. Just let him be big. So I don't mind it here. I like that pick a lot.
Yeah. All right. Getting to his 1 third-round pick now since he traded the others. He has Amik Robertson, cornerback, Louisiana Tech. Now also keep in mind, this mock came out before the
Combine.
No, after the Combine. Before they got their new cornerback added on their roster.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry. And so also in this mock draft, I encourage you to go over to milehighhuddle.com. He also has what they should do in free agency. And so it's kind of a combination of things to kind of give you a full picture of what he has going on in his thoughts here. So he does have the Broncos also signing a Mukamara. And so he says with this one, Denver brought in 2 corners in free agency and also brought back Bosby, while also expecting to get Bryce Callahan back. However, Callahan has major medical issues. Bosby has a lot of development left, and Mukamura has a year, maybe 2 left. Robertson is one of the better corners in this class, and after a strong combine is still flying under the radar. He's a special teams gunner year 1 that can step up year 2 if the Broncos part ways with Callahan and or lose a Mukamura.
I like Robertson. I feel like I've liked him as in regards to a sleeper. This is about as high as I've seen him taken or valued. So I give it a solid grade there. But I do think that I'm curious to see what other cornerbacks are still on the board.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to see his full mock draft of every team and what they took. So I couldn't tell you who was still available. But all right, moving on to round 4 then. He has 2 players, I guess he's got 3 picks here in the 4th round. Again, this was before the trade that the Broncos made. And so he has Damian Lewis, inside offensive lineman for LSU. Denver has to improve their interior offensive line, and Lewis is a good guard prospect. He brings good power with good movement. He would compete with the restricted free agent tendered Wilkinson for the right guard spot while dramatically improving Denver's depth at the position.
I like this one. I like the fit, the value. I do think he's getting a little bit of a blue blood bump. He's not the best mover. He's probably a little bit better in gap or, kind of a power. But round 4, I mean, that's about right. I've seen some people mocking him round 2, and that makes me flabbergasted. But I think that round 4, that's solid value for him. And then a guy that I like a lot, on his tape at least, he measured in smaller arm length if you'd think, but that was kind of the theme with the defensive backs. Terrell Burgess from Utah. Kareem Jackson has some injury concerns, and it's the wrong side of 30. Burgess was impressive at the combine and showed great athleticism. His tape shows how reliable of a tackler he can be, putting him as the number 3 safety for 2021 and 2020 and maybe 2021. He takes a step in the starter position post Jackson. Terrell Burgess is one of my guys, so I can't be asked to be not biased here. I love his tape a lot. I love the versatility. He is a guy. I mean, you're not ever going to ask him to be a single high safety, but the nickel / too deep and the tackling proficiency he shows, I really like his tape.
All right, then the last 4th round pick that he has here is Jordan Elliott, defensive lineman for Missouri. And I think this is incredible value here.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see him go Elliott and then Blacklock. Again, Eric loves picks. He wants to take... I've seen him send me mocks where there's like 20 picks. So we're really just going for the volume here, which is fine. But I'll read it here. Elliott had a solid combine, but there are other defensive linemen that had good, more consistent tape than he does, who also looked better in Indianapolis. Elliott can play right away in a sub role where he gets developed. Adding him to the young defensive line unit the Broncos have under Bill Collier would make this a position of strength. Round 4 for Elliott, that's a great spot. I've seen him mocked round 2. I think he's more of a round 3 player, but again, after those first 2 guys, it's anybody's game how they're going to go. Are people going to be patient and let the kind of balk at each other for the interior defensive line, or all of a sudden you're going to see somebody take one early and then you see everybody kind of panic and need to take one. So I like this pick a lot. Round 5 for a punter, which, shout out to him. He took the other Senior Bowl punter. I took Joseph Charlton. He takes Brandon Mann from Texas A&M. Denver has to improve the punter position. Mann is probably the best punter in the draft and has a leg to boom it. Also has control to handle shorter punts and pin opponents in their own end zone. Punting 8 games in Denver could see him set punting records. I'm not going to say he's going to set punting records, but I think that round 5, I have no issue with the Broncos going punter there.
Yeah. I've always kind of wondered if because because punters are going from elevation to no elevation, of how much that really does affect them as a punter, of just trying to figure out control. Because Denver always seems to struggle to have a punter. But you'd think it would be like the best place ever to be a punter.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe just that, because you see them go other places and they have success. But Denver just seems like they can't find that guy that can work. And I don't know, like I said, if maybe that's just because you have to change how you punt to Denver compared to any other town that you go to.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And then round 7 for him, James Robinson, running back from Illinois State, had a solid running back here. And I like Eric waiting on running back to round 7, getting a guy there. Daley Harding, a guy that we both like a lot. And then Nate Stanley, who had an okay combine, but there's some questions there. So will be interesting. Well,
it's 7th round.
Yeah, I mean, especially they're supposed to be compensatory picks.
Right.
That being said, did you see that Nick Corte's recent development of the CBA, where there's the cutoff that if that cutoff does apply to the new CBA and this upcoming draft class, that the Broncos would not get those 2 7th-round comp picks, that they do not reach the cutoff.
Well, that stinks.
Yeah. So worth monitoring. Hopefully they will carry over, but there's a chance that those 2 7th-round comp picks are not coming Denver's way.
And they're voting on that CBA right now. So
yep. So that might be a reason that they're waiting to announce the compensatory picks. Otherwise, why wouldn't they have announced them by now? So
right, they've always announced it by the time
crossed.
The combines happened.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But it sounds like with that new formula that Denver will not get those 2 7th-round picks. So worth watching. A little bit concerning. But overall, I mean, a lot of good mocks here. It does seem like Henry Ruggs is the consensus. I actually have now, before we get on out of here, Denver Bronco, or the NFL mock draft database. They have 3 players as the most mock player to Denver right now at 15, where these 3 players make up over 50% of the mocks to the Denver Broncos. Everyone else, it's 49.5%. So it's essentially a 50-50 split. But there's 3 players that are heavily mocked to Denver. Who do you think the one that's mocked to Denver the most is?
Well, Henry Ruggs.
Henry Ruggs, 35.1% of mock drafts in this database. Number 2?
Jerry Jeudy.
Jerry Jeudy at 7.9%. And then at 7.4% is...
Andrew Thomas.
God, Carl, you're looking right at it, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
That's exactly it. You got them all correct. So good job, Carl. I like to play the game where I have information in front of me and then I stump you. And, you ruined my game.
I'm sorry, man.
So I'm going to take my ball and go home. But anyway, that should wrap up today's This should wrap up today's podcast, where again, no guest. Hopefully we can get Brad Kelly on in the future. I'm going to continue to hound him at some point, trying to set up the time. It's just like, I need to stop messaging you in the DM, so I'm not coming off as annoying. But that's, again, I will remain persistent. But you can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.